I spent 2 months living in Cape Town last year and I loved it so much that I actually came back and spent another 2 months this year, but I realized that I made some mistakes that first time, so I'm gonna share all that with you today. Really think of this as like mistakes 2.0. So the first mistake that I made during my first trip was not recognizing how much the wine regions actually had to offer. I made the mistake of thinking, I'm not really a big drinker, I don't care to go and see the wine regions, and that couldn't have been a bigger mistake. If you're asking yourself, well, what else am I gonna do other than drinking? Let me tell you about one of our favorite places, Babylon Storm, which is one of the wine farms out here, and there is so much to do. You buy your tickets in and you can just wander and explore the entire thing, and it is just gorgeous. They also have multiple restaurants on site. They have like a farm area, greenhouse, so you can have ice cream, coffee, eat at all the different restaurants, enjoy the scenery, have a picnic, enjoy the animals, do whatever you want. And I wish that we had more time there. And that actually leads into the next tip, which is go earlier than you think. When we went out there, we went at about like 11 a.m. thinking that we were gonna hop around to a bunch of different wineries. We actually never made it to another winery, and we left Babylon Storm thinking, man, we wish we had more time here. We wish we had gone earlier in the day. So also probably a pretty good idea to do some research ahead of time to figure out which wineries you actually wanna stop at, because some will have different restaurants, some will have more of kind of that farm experience and wandering, others will be more of your traditional winery where you're just gonna test wine. So think about what you want that experience to look like, and then do that research accordingly. Another mistake that I made during my first trip, but I didn't make this time, was actually going on the moonlight hike at Lion's Head. And if you don't know, Lion's Head is this beautiful mountain where when it's a full moon, people actually go and hike up it. Going up around like the sunset time, you watch the sunset from on top of the mountain and then you hike back down. During my first visit, I didn't actually do it because I heard that it was maybe a little bit dangerous, but you shouldn't let that get in the way. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't take precautions. You definitely always should, especially when doing something like hiking at night, but there were so many people hiking that it felt like you were just in a big pack of other people. And I always say, use the mom test. Would you bring your mom on an excursion like this? And well, I actually did. I brought my mom out. I flew her out from Colorado and she did this hike and she loved it as well. It really was one of the most magical experiences I've had in Cape Town. I wouldn't give it up for anything, and I definitely think that you should do it, but do make sure to check the weather because you don't want to go up there if it's too windy or if it's going to get really cold. And if you want to be extra safe, make sure that you start the hike early enough where you're gonna hike up all in daylight, you're gonna watch the sunset from up top, and then you're gonna start heading back down right once that sun dips below the horizon. And make sure that you bring some sort of flashlight, or at least make sure that your phone is fully charged, because yes, you're gonna be wanting to take plenty of pictures, but you are gonna want that flashlight on the way back down. The full moon will definitely help you see things, but it doesn't hurt to have an extra light. Another mistake that I made during my first visit was I didn't pay attention to where the actual best beach was gonna be, but I think I found that. Clifton Beach is absolutely gorgeous. There are Clifton Beaches 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can't really go wrong with any of them, but on the 4th beach, you'll actually find something called Kayak Clifton. And no, you don't have to go out with a tour operator. You can just rent a kayak. It's like $5 for every 30 minutes, and you can go straight out into this little cove. It's protected by big waves, but they have a kelp forest that you just get to glide and kayak over this forest. It is absolutely spectacular, just beautiful. There are seals all over the place, big rocks where you can go and kind of interact with the seals. The scenery is just unmatched. It is unbelievably beautiful. So definitely make sure that you go on kayak if you get the opportunity, but also just hang out on those beaches. So much to do, such a good scene. And we're gonna come back to this beach because it plays a pretty important role in one of the tips coming up. But another thing that I think you should note is with things like the hike, or if you're going up to Table Mountain and gonna take the cable car, or wanting to kayak, make sure to do those things earlier on in your trip, or at least check the weather, because Cape Town does get pretty windy, and wind is the one thing that will shut down all these events. When it gets too windy, they don't send cable cars up to top of Table Mountain. Kayak Clifton isn't out there, and it's probably not safe to do that moonlight hike. So make sure to do those things earlier on in your trip. That way you have as many opportunities and don't let the weather get in your way. Time to talk about a tourist trap, because there's a new one that's opened up since I've returned. So there's something called the Time Out Market, which is down in the V&A waterfront. And it is a beautiful little market, and you're gonna be able to go and try a bunch of different foods there, but the Time Out Market is really definitely catered towards the tourists. The food is fine, but you are gonna pay a premium price, which makes sense on the area. You'll know how I feel about the V&A waterfront if you watched the first video of what I wish I knew here. But a couple of alternatives if you want a more local feel. The first one is called Mojo Market, and it's over in the Sea Point area. It's kind of like the same thing, but less geared at the tourist and more of a local atmosphere. Bunch bunch of different food vendors, always have live musicians, a great scene on a Friday or Saturday night, but probably my bigger recommendation is the farmers market, which happens on Saturdays and Sundays, and I think on Wednesday nights as well. And the farmers market here is just unbelievable. By far the best farmers market I've seen in the entire world. Don't make the mistake of thinking that it's only for locals in a place where you're just gonna pick up local produce. No, that is so much more than that. There are so many wonderful food vendors. There's a beer garden and wonderful bar. There's just space to lounge around. You'll see families, old people, everybody will be there. Of course, there is wonderful produce and it is presented in just a gorgeous way. Boutique shopping, like it is just the place to be on a weekend morning, and I couldn't recommend it enough. Side tip here, if you're at the market, definitely get your hands on some biltong. Think of it as kind of like beef jerky kind of thing, but it's their local version and it is so much better than anything that we've got in the US. You can get it all over town, but definitely make sure to check that out. Another thing that I think a lot of tourists end up missing, and I missed a few of them myself, are the tidal pools. Cape Town has tidal pools scattered all over the place, and they are these beautiful tidal pools that are right up against the ocean, a beautiful place to take a dip, or just at least go and watch how the locals enjoy them. It's just a really unique part of the culture that you don't get in many other places around the world, so definitely do yourself a favor and look up which tidal pools you might want to pay a visit to, because they are pretty neat. And another place I think some tourists end up missing, not necessarily a ton, is Kalk Bay. And Kalk Bay is on the way down to like the Cape Point, where you're gonna go to the southern tip, or where you're going to like Simonstown to see the penguins on the beach. Kalk Bay is right before that, so it's a great little area to stop on one of those day trips. And I didn't spend enough time there my first go around, but this time I did, and it's a pretty special place. A really like artistic little fishing village, lots of great little markets and restaurants, a great place to hang out. But I assume that if you're going down there, you're probably doing that full day trip thing where you're gonna see the penguins, do Cape Point, and that is all great. But one thing that I think is important to note is that on your return back up, probably a pretty good idea to drive Chapman's Peak. It is this unbelievably scenic, just gorgeous drive where you're kind of overlooking Hout Bay and you're just looking at the ocean and these cliffs. It is just unbelievably gorgeous. So much so that I actually feel like it's a little bit dangerous to drive because you're just in awe the whole time looking out the window. So make sure you have a good driver, but definitely make sure that you spend some time doing that drive. And if you're looking for more beauty, remember how I said that Clifton Beach was gonna come back? It's coming back in this way. This time I didn't actually stay over in Sea Point. I stayed in Clifton at this Airbnb that I normally don't mention the Airbnbs, but this Airbnb was absolutely gorgeous. I'm trying to think of like how to describe this, and like, you know what you think like a perfect beach house would be? This is it. Like, I just kind of felt special the whole last 2 months. Like, I'm waking up listening to the waves every morning. I can literally see the waves from my bed, like private access down to the beach. Like, it is just unbelievable, a truly spectacular experience. It doesn't even feel real that I've stayed here this long, so I'm gonna end up making a whole video on that Airbnb just to kind of show you what it's actually like. But if you wanna look at this Airbnb and wanna consider booking it for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description because definitely the best Airbnb I've ever stayed in. Now I'm gonna give you a couple money saving tips while you're here, but first, I wanna tell you about just a couple of my favorite places that you might wanna check out for a meal if you're looking for something good. So first, a couple casual places. There's a spot called Pauline's, which is a little coffee shop but has some wonderful dishes. It's kind of over in that Sea Point, Gree Point area, and it is wonderful. Nothing is gonna disappoint there, so highly recommend them. If you're looking for like specialty coffee, there's actually a place called Truth Coffee, which is right downtown, and I think it was in like 2016. It was actually ranked the #1 coffee shop in the entire world, and it's easy to see why. It is themed, it is like a really cool experience, wonderful coffee, and it's a great option to bring home a souvenir for one of those coffee-loving friends because you just buy some coffee beans, cheap, easy to transport, voila, done, right? I'm trying to help you in all the ways. So definitely recommend them. But if you're looking for kind of like a fancier meal, 2 places that I recommend. The first one is called Reverie Social Table, and it's a really unique dining experience where you book it and you're gonna be sitting with a bunch of other strangers at one really long table. It is just kind of one of those magical experiences where you get to meet great people, drink great wine, and just, yeah, have a great time. And that's kind of what traveling is all about. But another one, if you're looking for like a really elevated dining experience, if you drive out into the wine region, there is this estate where they have a restaurant called La Petite Colombe, and it is just magical. I mean, the scenery of the estate itself is just unbelievable. The food somehow even better. Like, you're talking about a fancy schmancy meal kind of here. I took my mom there for a special occasion. It was like, I don't know, 13, 14 courses. It was pretty spectacular, but definitely one of those elevated experiences if you're looking for it. And we're about to jump into the money saving tips, but I recognize there's a ton of other restaurants that are worth trying as well. So I'm creating a whole list of just like all the places at different price points here in Cape Town, but also for all of the other places around the world. So if you want access to that, because it's not done, you can scan this QR code right here. It's going to sign you up for my newsletter. I'm going to send out through the newsletter like where you can actually get access to that list once it's ready. And in the meantime, the newsletter will give you a weekly travel tip and an update from me. But let's talk about some of those money saving tips. So the very first thing to note is that this is probably one of those places where I screwed up the first time and I should have rented a car. And I did this time, and I do think it actually saved me some money. Uber is a great option here, and I talk about that in the first tip video. But if you are going to be doing some of those day trips to the wine regions, to the Cape of Good Hope, all of that stuff, it might be a little bit cheaper to rent a car. I did rent through a place that was like really budget, like 35 bucks a day, I think it was. It was through discovercars.com, and the vendor was a little bit sketchy. I want to warn you about that. So not saying that you should use this, but it worked for me, and it was 35 bucks. So I was like, okay, I'll take the risk because it's that cheap. So I'll leave a link in the description so you can check them out if you want, but do note that that car rental might be helpful. If you do rent a car and need to fill it with gas, you're not going to pump the gas yourself. There'll be attendants that will help you the whole way. So that is completely normal. Don't freak out about that. And they all take card when you pay them. But if you aren't going to rent the car and you do still want a money saving option, Bolt is an Uber competitor here, and there aren't as many drivers, so it does take a little bit longer to get a ride, and that's why I wouldn't recommend it around Cape Town itself. But when you're going on some of those longer day trips, if you do want to use a Bolt, it's probably going to save you a bit of money. It was like 50% cheaper doing the 30-minute drive from the airport to the Airbnb on Bolt compared to Uber, so keep that in mind. And if you're wanting to know which area of town that you should stay in, or you want other logistical tips, you can watch part 1, which is right here, where I jump into all that. But if you want to check out the Airbnb that I just stayed in, you can watch it right here. So I hope all this was helpful, and we'll catch you guys next time.